So for those of you who don't know, we've been doing this a little longer than a year. We have a special arrangement where we actually record the show on the couch in the Oval Office.
Oh, I was unaware.
I just blindfold Maggie and walk her into a room. She has no idea.
I've been hallucinating this whole time. I don't know what's going on. You're saying every week we fly to DC.
Yes.
We go through security.
There's a secret tunnel from the apartment into the chimney.
Into Shelob's lair.
Of the White House. It gives the show a certain prestige, the respect it deserves.
Sure. I bet the acoustics in there are amazing.
Yeah, I mean, ask any of our millions of listeners. Honestly, the acoustics are amazing.
Yeah, they've been to the Oval Office, all of them. Mm-hmm. They know.
Just, the president, actually both presidents, this is not a partisan issue. They reached out and said, this thing you're doing, the one and only podcast.
The single podcast.
We need to be a part of it. This is the next.
It's a part of something big. This is American history.
Yeah, this is the next leap forward in American innovation and entrepreneurship. And
so they invite us to the Oval Office. All like foreign and domestic policy, all of those things, they pause for the pod.
For about an hour a week.
Understandably
more than
so.
That now.
We got to set up. And now we're doing 2 a week? What is that? Because really going to set the country back like 50 years.
The gross national revenue from this podcast, the only podcast, of course, makes up about half of the country's GDP.
Honestly, yeah. So we're doing you all a favor.
The president's, everyone wants a piece of that pie.
Yes.
It's too big.
That's why the tax rates are so good. I literally know nothing about those things, so I don't know why I'm... Is that how that works?
So
I don't know anything.
On the shuttle in today, there's a shuttle that takes us through the tunnel from our apartment into the Oval Office.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Very speedy.
I was thinking, and I realized there was a massive reason that I liked this story that wasn't in my notes at all.
The story of us going to the Oval Office every week?
No, that's a documentary.
A story could be true. A documentary is a story, Cameron.
But I realized there was a whole part of my notes that I just hadn't thought of. And I thought of it a second before we arrived here.
That happens to you often, I think. You have these great, brilliant epiphanies right at the last minute, and that's just not fair. Biologically, evolutionarily, that's not fair. That's how it goes for you.
Maybe my one skill, because small Cam in second grade decided writing is going to be the thing. Mm-hmm. So I zeroed in on English class and books and stuff to the detriment of all other worldly skills. But I got pretty good at it.
Yeah. And I'm over here killing myself for every school subject only to just be this. It's fine. So
I'm, I can make weird theories about stories. I can tell stories and, that's kind of it.
That's all I got. And you can remember really obscure facts.
Yeah, so I'm using all of that here, and we're gonna get to that fun idea, but it made me a lot more excited for this show. So
all right,
again, good. 3 minutes in,
this is a podcast.
This is a podcast.
I don't even want to say what
the one and only.
This is
100% White House approved.
Of course. This message has been approved.
Second breakfast. So yeah, we talk about fantasy stuff. Usually it's Tolkien, but we've been branching out a little lately because the world's bigger than that.
Yeah, well, so we have a second breakfast every episode of Tolkien that we do. We talk about Tolkien, and then we have a second breakfast where we talk about something else.
Yeah. This
is our something else, and now it's separate. So it's actually 2 full meals, so you're welcome.
Yeah.
Although...
Gorge yourselves.
I believe this is coming... We are releasing the second breakfast is first. So, that's fine.
Yeah, so...
Who cares?
The main Tolkien discussion is still always going to be Friday on the dot, 6 a.m.
Yes, Eastern time.
Yeah.
We don't even live on the East Coast, but we're still sticking with Eastern time. Yeah. I'm bitter that we had to move.
So yeah, midweek we're going to come back, when
it has to be 6 a.m. Eastern because we're in DC and that's Eastern.
Exactly.
Sorry, I misspoke.
Master of improv.
That's me.
So
yes, and
when the when the subject we're covering is big enough.
Why are you pretending like it's not in the title? Like we're teasing it.
No, I just mean as a general like programming note.
Oh, okay.
You know, if we just have a small one or we have a big beefy chapter that week, maybe we'll just do a tiny one strapped to the end of the normal show. But most of the time, I think going forward, we're going to have a a sort of branching off second breakfast episode about something else.
Yes.
You guys know what we talk about, horror movies and sometimes Tolkien.
Yeah. Sometimes.
This one is about the Green Knight.
Mm-hmm.
So we saw the movie
we did.
probably a week and a half ago.
It was a while ago, and it's been killing me that I can't talk to you about it.
I know.
Like, we normally when we go see a movie, we'll like talk about it as soon as we leave the theater on the way home and stuff with dinner. We just didn't even say anything to each other because we couldn't say anything, so we just drove home in silence, and it was really strange. I didn't like it at all.
The thing is, now
it was like seeing a movie with somebody who's not you, and that upset me.
But now that we have a partnership with the American government to do the podcast, it's actually it would be trading state secrets if I were to tell you what I thought about the movie before we're recording.
Classified information.
And I am a patriot.
Of course.
I would never betray my nation.
Never do that to America.
So yeah, we saw the movie, and around that time, Maggie read the poem.
I did, yeah. I'd never read it before. It's funny, the copy I have, I had bought it for a literature class in college, and like it had been on the syllabus, and then we just didn't read it. A lot of professors did that. They'd put things on the syllabus and be like, and I was like, but I bought the book. I mean, it was a $6 paperback, so it wasn't a big deal. But
a Signet classic, if you will.
But I've had this copy for like I probably had it for like 8 years, and I had always intended to read it because I love medieval literature, and like I always wanted to read it, and I just never did. And then this movie was coming out, and I was like, well, I guess it's time now. My baby brain can only read a book if there's a movie about it. So I read it, and it was fun.
I mean, as much as I joke about the show being the intersection of horror movies and Winnie the Pooh talk, the number one thing we talk about on almost every episode is adaptation.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's bad that we're going to talk about the source material and the modern reinvention of a story. No,
I agree. Speaking of adaptation, I totally forgot the last time we recorded. We got this really great piece of listener feedback that I wanted to share on our Instagram. You can follow us there on Second Breakfast Pod. We post fun things, but also you can chat with us there. We also have an email. But anyway,
that was a very organic plug.
Thank you. And you naturally introduced it for me. I was going to forget until you said it. So sorry, guys. So this message comes from Flora, who's been a longtime listener. Flora says, hello, I just finished, and this is more kind of about Tolkien, but it doesn't have to be. She says, hello, I just finished listening to this week's episode and enjoyed the second breakfast topic about adaptations. I was wondering if you've ever thought about how the order in which we experience stories, both book then movie or vice versa, affects how we view the changes made from one to another. Usually we read the book and are more than critical of the movie, but I have had instances where I've read a book after seeing the movie, and then I'm more likely to prefer the movie, possibly because I experienced it first. Count of Monte Cristo being an example where there are tangents and storylines in the book that aren't in the movie, and I felt similarly to how you felt about Tom Bombadil in Fellowship. If you haven't heard our Fellowship episodes, we cannot stand Tom Bombadil, and we are correct about that, and that's the end of that. Anyway, I was curious about your thoughts since people prefer what is familiar and don't like change, as you mentioned. When we experience something, sorry, this is too long, so I had to take 2 screenshots. When we experience something
insulting, dear listeners.
When we experience something could influence what we feel about it, whether it is a true or honest adaptation or not. And then she says, love the pod, and P.S. I also don't know how to say Cam, what's the word that I couldn't say? Anonymity?
Yeah.
She says
anonymity.
She says she also can't say it, and she just learned that she can't spell it. So thank you, Flora.
That's a great Flora, point. I don't think your message was too long.
No,
Maggie
I just meant too long to fit on a screenshot. I didn't mean the message was too long. The message was wonderfully lengthed. I just didn't get a screenshot, and then I switched to the next screenshot, and it was messed up.
You stand here in the Oval Office insulting the American people.
The president is standing over my shoulder as we speak, and he's looking at me like a disappointed grandfather, and I don't feel good about it. But thank you, Flora. That's a great point to bring up, because we saw the Lord of the Rings movies before reading the books, and that's like where I think a lot of our opinions are coming from. So it was interesting to do this because I had intended to finish the poem before we saw the movie, and then we saw the movie earlier than we had planned to. All of a sudden it was like, yeah, we bought tickets, and so I hadn't finished. I had like a fourth of the poem left. So I kind of got to do both, which was interesting.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that email was written by Peter Jackson under a pseudonym?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean...
Flora is Peter Jackson. She just won't tell us. That's really funny.
I agree that you're more loyal to the first incarnation of a story you see.
Yes. No matter how much you try to say you aren't, you're stuck with that. And it doesn't even matter which actually came first. It's whatever you consumed first. I think that's just a natural inclination. Because that's like your first experience of the story.
I think I've heard people make that point even if they don't really know what they're saying. Like when people say, Daniel Craig was my James Bond. Mm-hmm. The story, I mean, the stories are formulaic is kind of a condescending word, but there's
they're procedural.
Yeah, there's a procedural element to the James Bond movies. Mm-hmm. So the biggest variable is pretty much who's playing the lead actor.
Yeah.
So you if you like one of them, you're probably going to like the other ones, but the first one you see, you kind of imprint on, and that one becomes yours. I think it's sort of the same principle.
Yeah, well, and it's also about interpretation. I think too. Because the first adaptation, the first form of the story you see is the first way you interpret it. In the same way that, like, I've talked about how I don't always agree with like the Jim Dale reading of the Harry Potter audiobooks, because I read them first, and so I have my own interpretation of the lines and the way that the narration reads, and I'd read them so many times before listening to the audiobooks that I had all that in my head already. So then I heard this new interpretation and I was partial to the first one. Mm-hmm. And that's the same with movies and books and vice versa as well.
Yeah.
Anyway, I thought that was a great thing to bring up. And so having read the poem both before and after the movie is really interesting. Especially because I feel like the interpretation of the tone of the movie is different than the poem. I guess maybe we should I think I'll summarize the poem really quick, if that's okay.
Yeah, I didn't read it because I wanted to be able to react to the differences and just have a kind of focused perspective on the adaptation.
Yeah, you also didn't want to reveal that you can't read.
Yeah.
Cam only does the audiobooks for Return of the King. He's actually illiterate.
Sir Davos Seaworth.
Cam, I focused on English class, can't read. So, and this, I did not write this recap. This is pulled directly from the introduction of the copy that I'm reading. It's just the Signet Classic.
Just
Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. The introduction is by Brenda Webster, and she summarizes the poem so well that I was like, I'm just going to pull that. So in the poem, a huge green knight arrives at King Arthur's court and, swaggering arrogantly, challenges someone to behead him with the proviso that he can return the blow in a year and a day. Gawain accepts. The giant kneels and throws his green hair forward to bare a neck thick as a tree. A minute later, his head is rolling across the ground. Laughing, the courtiers kick it like a ball, then watch horrified as the giant lurches to his feet and picks it up by the hair. His bloody lips tell Gawain to meet him at the Green Chapel in a year and a day. He promises the blow will be returned. Almost a year later, on his way to the appointed meeting place, Gawain visits a castle and is persuaded by its lord, a seemingly friendly host, to stay there for 3 nights. Unbeknownst to Gawain, the Lord Bersalak is the Green Knight in another form. To entertain his guest, Bersalak suggests a game where they exchange winnings. Whatever Bersalak kills in his day's hunting in exchange for what Gawain wins in the castle. Gawain, without realizing that it is a test of loyalty, agrees. While Bersalak hunts, his wife attempts to seduce Gawain. Gawain resists, but finally allows her to give him her girdle, which she says will save his life. In the nightly exchange of winnings, he fails to turn it over to the host. Then on the appointed day, Gawain meets the Green Knight and receives a light cut on his neck, which the Green Knight explains is for disloyalty. Realizing that the Green Knight and Bersalak are one and the same, Gawain is overcome by shame but blames his failure on women's perfidy. Of course. He returns to Arthur. We'll talk about that. He returns to Arthur's court wearing the girdle as a badge of his shame. The courtiers console him and swear that they too will wear girdles to keep their beloved knight company.
Well, that's very different from the movie.
Yes, it is. It's like the basic things are the same. Green Knight, like the beginning, very similar. Mm-hmm. But like what happens at the end, what happens in the middle.
Yeah.
It all changes quite a lot. And another thing that's not mentioned in here is the Gawain's mother.
Yeah.
So her name in the story is, what is it? It is Morgan La Fay.
Yes, yeah.
In the poem, she is Arthur's half-sister and also Gawain's aunt. In the movie, and also the old woman in the castle.
Yeah.
And in the movie, she is his mother. And like, that's it. And I guess the other stuff is kind of open to interpretation. Like, is she the woman in the castle? Because the Green Knight being the man in the castle is also not in the movie. You can, you can interpret it that way, but it's not really they're pretty much
not really. I mean,
separate.
They have extremely distinct voices.
It's more like if you've read the poem, you could say, yeah, maybe they're the same because you already know. But other than that, that's not really in the movie.
But if a movie is going to avoid a huge character reveal and payoff like that, it's on purpose. Like, the movie does end on a bit of an ambiguous note, but I don't think it's that ambiguity.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm not sure what you... Yes, okay.
I think the movie...
Sorry,
I think the movie definitively does not make the knight be that lord.
Got it. Sorry, the president is looking at me in the eye, and it's really distracting me.
I think the ambiguity is about whether or not the... Well, actually, we're going to have a spoiler section, so let's...
Should
we? I mean, did we spoil it?
Was that spoil? Well, no, it was the poem. Movie's different.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, nothing
I tried to break up my notes into impressions and spoilers.
Okay, then let's talk a bit more about impressions first, and then we can get into spoilers. That's a good call.
Yeah, thank you for the overview of the poem.
Yeah, that was just a really nice, succinct way to summarize it, and I appreciated it.
To make things much more surface level, what'd you think of the movie?
I really liked it. I was struck by, again, the tonal difference. The movie is much more fantastical. It really leans into the fantasy elements that the poem doesn't lean into much at all. Wow, I just burped. I'm sorry. But like in the Oval Office, how dare I? But like, for example, oh my God.
It's fun to watch every thought in Maggie's head just slip out of one of her ears.
Literally. Oh. The Green Knight. I'm so sorry.
You're so afraid.
I'm terrified right now. The Green Knight. I'm also thrown off because Cam's been adjusting the levels this entire time. I have no idea if I'm screaming right now. Am I yelling in your ear?
No, you're good.
I feel like I'm yelling.
You were a little before, but now it's
because you keep adjusting and I don't know how loud I'm supposed to be.
How many hats I wear?
Just the one. The dunce hat.
Man, the number of times in the billions of years I've known you that I thought you've been completely whiffing a joke and then you come in like 3 seconds too late with a punchline.
And it's not even that good of a punchline.
No, that was great. And there's like a gratitude and relief in the laugh. It is impressive.
Thank you. As I was saying, I'm an intelligent person.
As I was stumbling.
The Green Knight. In the movie, he looks like a tree. He's a much more like
that's right. I never thought about that.
He's a
He kind of does look like a tree.
He's a fantastical, like fantasy creature. In the poem, he's just a handsome, tall green knight. Like,
what does that mean? Like his skin?
Yeah, like everything about him is green and gold. Like the author goes into extreme detail about like all of the gold on his armor and how glittering he is and how beautiful he is. Like he's not this like scary looking dude. He's supposed to be this like beautiful, handsome like knight. And so they really upped the fantasy element of it and almost the horror of it in the movie adaptation.
Yeah.
And similarly, like Gawain's journey through like to get to the Green Chapel, all the stuff in the middle, like before he gets to the castle, all the stuff in the middle, that's like, I don't know, a dozen lines in the poem, maybe 2 or 3 dozen. Like it's really, there's not much. It's all like all the plot. So the poem's broken into 4 parts.
Yeah.
2 of the 2 middle parts, he's at the castle. Like not much happens on the journey there.
Because the movie beefed that up a lot. The movie has like chapter title cards.
It does, yeah.
But it doesn't have, isn't it 3 chapters instead of 4?
I think, well, what are you referring to? Are you referring to like...
The big text that comes up on the screen.
I feel like there are like 5 of those.
Oh, okay.
There are several of those.
Sure. But anyway, they're not exactly the same as the book.
Yeah. The point is that like tonally and genre-ly, the movie is much more fantastical than the poem is.
Yeah.
Even though like the whole thing is fantastical, just the movie leans into that quite a bit more. And and it's a bit spookier, and the witchcraft thing is much more leaned upon. I mean, that's in the poem, but it's like an afterthought or a footnote compared to like a full like central through line like it is in the movie. But no, I really liked the movie. I thought everything was like, all the elements were there 100%. The acting was good. The writing was fantastic. Directing, set design, costumes, the score was amazing. Like, I really, really liked it. And I liked how slow paced it was. I wasn't bored at all. But it was like, it wasn't in a hurry. And I liked that. I feel like a lot of movies are in a hurry nowadays. And I liked that it was taking its time.
Yeah, no, there was a confidence to this that was amazing. I know I made that James Bond analogy, but I think everyone has that same association with some of the first great movies they see that become their touchstones for great movies forever. And I think with me, it was, and you know, we've seen a ton of horror now. Over the course of my life, I've seen a ton of horror movies. My favorite's probably still The Witch.
Yeah, it's my favorite for sure.
That was one of the first great movies I saw. And I saw it in a theater. I saw it with you and Tristan, the guy who we had feedback from in the last episode. A longtime friend of the show. One of these days he might make it to the Oval Office with us.
We'll have to put him on one of those chairs across from the couch. He can't sit on the couch. He can sit at the Resolute desk.
But the Witch did that for me, where I'd never seen anything like it. It was one of the first slow burn movies that had such a patience and confidence.
Takes its time.
That it absorbed me in the same way a great book did, or just the way someone tells a good story. It had so many of those qualities across genre or medium that I just love. That one will always be probably my favorite.
Yeah. Also stars Ralph Ineson, who plays the Green Knight. Okay. Okay. Sorry.
I let you talk, Maggie.
Oh my God.
So
you interrupt me constantly.
But the only times you interrupt or to
say
spoil my next point.
I don't know what your next point is. We don't consult beforehand. Sorry, we're on the same wavelength. You're welcome. I'm sorry, that was hard. Okay.
So this felt like the next step in that like subgenre of mythic period horror, because it was maybe more graphic than The Witch. It had that elevated, transcendent surrealism, and it was even more folkloric than The Witch was.
Yeah, it was much. I mean, I would classify this as fantasy, honestly.
Yeah.
The trailers made it look like it was going to be more horror-y, and there were like frightening elements to it, and it was dark, and the score reminded me of the score in The Witch, which is interesting because it was a totally different composer. But it was a fantasy story. That's what it was.
But even horror movies have like flashes of horror. So this having only flashes of horror doesn't mean it isn't horror in a way. You know?
I suppose. But like, at no point was I scared. No. There wasn't like that tension or that suspense that you see in a horror film.
Yeah, but not all horror has to scare you. I think that's a different...
I'm just saying, like, if I'm going to watch a movie with my friend who doesn't like scary movies, we can watch this one.
But
that's all I'm saying.
Being like an hour and a half long A24 movie, this movie, and not in a bad way at all, but it stands on the shoulders of The Witch.
No, it totally does.
It absolutely has the confidence of that prior success. And probably 10 times the budget.
Yeah, like, I could tell the budget was higher in
the
this
sheer
one.
Scale of this film. The number of characters, the number of costume changes, and more than anything else, the locations.
Yes, because you could, like, all of this is like shot in like wilderness in these beautiful, like, I think they shot a lot in Ireland. And like there are probably a couple like sets, like the castle and stuff, but most of it is outside, and so it's in these beautiful locations.
And it kind of reminded me of Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings in a way, because I mean, obviously, if The Witch is one of my favorite movies, I'm going to draw that as a touchstone to other similar movies that I like. But I think there's an element of casting here that gives The Green Knight that seal of approval. Having both of the parents of The Witch in this movie, when it's from the same production company and it's got the same sensibility, feels like the sort of stunt casting of Boromir into Game of Thrones Season 1. I mean, subliminally or maybe overtly to the audience, it passes the torch.
Well, and it also links the stories like as if they're all part of this one continuous myth.
Sure.
All four of these stories, The Witch, The Green Knight, Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, like they're all fantastical stories. They're all things that could or could not be true depending on how much magic you believe in. And so having this continuum of actors, it places them all in the same universe, and so it all feels connected the way that all like mythology does, and it feels timeless and like it's gonna be repeating itself, which is fun.
Yeah, and you should absolutely go see this. I mean, just to
yeah.
spoil that, it's unbelievable, and it's a great theatrical experience.
Is it still in theaters?
Yeah.
It's been in it for a while.
I think it is. I don't know.
Yeah, I hope it is. Well,
Google it.
Look it up. You can do that.
Yeah, A24 is doing occasional screenings online where you can pay a rental fee and watch it at home. So if you'd prefer to do that, that's available too.
Please see it though, especially because it's been delayed because of the pandemic. And I remember being so excited when it was announced. Like, I feel like it was 20 years ago. I know it wasn't,
but this has been my
but
most anticipated movie for years. Since basically it was announced and delayed and delayed and delayed.
Also, can we talk about Dev Patel? He was fantastic.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you love this movie, go watch this. The director and writer, or I guess adapter, like he writes it a particular way on the screen that he's basically revitalizing the myth. He doesn't like take credit for writing the whole thing because it's like a general folklore. If you notice that, it didn't just say written. It said like adapted for the screen.
Oh, that's cool.
There was a different kind of writing credit on there.
That's interesting. I didn't notice that.
This is great, go watch this, but also go watch this guy's previous movie, A Ghost Story, which is a lot more challenging than this. It's more difficult. It's even more of a slow burn.
Yeah.
It's not for everyone, but it's a really good movie about grief and loss and death, and I mean, in sort of the same way this one is.
Yeah.
So that's great, but
what's
also
the director's? I can't remember the director's
David
name.
Lowery.
David Lowery. Thank you.
Lowery. But if you like this as well, go watch The Newsroom to see more Dev Patel.
Baby Dev Patel from like 10 years ago.
He's I mean, he is the anchor of that show.
He's so good on that show. He starts out as like really a C character, but he's like a lower A character now. He's so good. But it was fun to like be in the middle of watching The Newsroom and then to go see The Green Knight and then come back and we're still watching The Newsroom, like just to see his range and his growth. He's really good in this movie because like he is like your true main character. He's in every scene you watch, and he's so good.
And he, again, he really anchors the movie, not just by being in every scene, but his demeanor, I think, anchors the fantasy and the surrealism. Because this movie runs away with some of those scenes in a really great way. But I haven't actually said his name yet. You said Gawain, which I think is going to age.
No, I said Gawain. We discussed this beforehand. I said Gawain.
I think I remember the first time I read Harry Potter, my family said Hermione, like everyone else.
Yeah, my mom did too. Yeah.
So in the movie here, they say Garwin.
Yes, which I literally don't understand.
And then
I'm confused by that.
I sent you a video of David Lowery talking, and he said Gawain. Gawain sounds so dumb and American.
I know it does, but I'm telling you, I've had this book for 8 years. Every time I look at it, I read.
Gawain.
It's spelled Gawain.
I know.
Gawain. I mean, I know it's not that. I've been saying Gawain. I'm not going to say Garwin because that's just phonetically incorrect. So I'm not going to do that. Sorry. All right. I'll say Gawain. Anyway, sorry.
I'm going to say Gawain or Garwin.
Okay.
Anyway, cool. the thing I love about Dev Patel's performance here is that the movie is so elevated. The things that happen, the weird fantastical creatures that run through the scene and almost take over the story for 10 minutes at a time. He is so neutral and restrained in his performance that the movie becomes this weird dreamlike thing. It's really the only time I've seen this executed to this degree of success. There's a calm surrealism to the movie.
Yes.
The creatures and mysteries, like he receives them almost politely. It's really interesting. There are long stretches without any dialogue, and he still makes it powerfully like character focused.
I was gonna say he does it in such a like human, real way, like the way he reacts to things. Because this is one of the big changes from the poem to the movie. In the poem, he's already a knight. He's like already this noble knight. In the movie, he's trying to become a knight. And so he's in a much more humble position. And so he feels very relatable, and like you feel really tied to him because he's reacting to things much in a way you might, kind of no matter who you are. Like he really is playing up those elements of being like of humanity that we sometimes like and sometimes don't like because one of the main themes of this story in the poem and the movie is temptation and like virtue and like how to overcome temptation and to be virtuous. And the movie and Dev Patel's performance really focus on his him leaning into a lot of that temptation and reacting to things in a very human way, and like that makes you feel really connected to him and not like this arm's length. Like the character of Gawain in the poem is a much more arm's length, like virtuous knight who's really trying to be virtuous, and he does suffer with temptation and things like that, but he still doesn't feel like a real person in the way that a lot of characters in medieval literature do. But Dev Patel's performance is so human, and it's really compelling. And
because so many of the mysteries or strange, like surreal characters aren't explained. Mm-hmm. You don't get names sometimes. You rarely get symbolic meaning.
And we don't know if something did happen or if he dreamed it.
Right.
Because it doesn't matter.
It makes the story more dynamic and much more friendly to interpretation.
Yes.
Because you never know what's real.
Yes.
What is a trauma, a vision? There are ghosts at one point. Mm-hmm. What could be a flashback?
Yeah.
I like how friendly it is to that, even though it clears up or inverts some of the mysteries from the poem.
Yes, right. Well, and much like The Witch, there are some of the ways you can interpret this are all of this is true, all of this supernatural stuff is happening, or you can interpret it as this main character is going insane and there's a logical explanation for everything. If you just look hard enough, it's all in the movie for you, you know? Like in the way that you could think that the rotting corn is causing the family to hallucinate in The Witch, that sort of thing.
Sure. Or the thing with the Native American burial ground underneath the Overlook Hotel in The Shining.
And underneath the pet cemetery.
Yeah.
Come on, Stephen. Yeah. No, exactly. Like, and I like when horror and fantasy, artists, creators do that, because I like when you're not sure if it's happening or not, because that's the scariest thing is this supernatural thing real or not? Because if you know it's real, then you can accept that and then deal with it, and that's your new reality. But if you don't know, that's much scarier.
Yeah, I want to take a second before we get into spoilers to talk about a really visual thing and sort of the story structure of this movie.
Okay.
Because it felt like, I mean, we've watched a lot of movies over the course of our billion-year relationship here, set vaguely in this time period. Like, we like olden times.
Yes, I love the olden times.
We like Jane Austen times. Mm-hmm. We don't like Stone Age, but we like this, swords and stuff.
If I can contextualize for you, my major in undergrad was English. I don't think I read a book for a class, like, except for one class, which was LGBT lit. I read some 20th century stuff in there. But I never took a class where I read anything like post 1900. I was very focused on the olden times. Like, I realized I've never read Hemingway somehow because I never like took a 20th century lit class. I also didn't focus on American lit very much. It was very much like olden times Britain. That was where my focus was.
So your only exposure to Hemingway is Corey Stoll in Midnight in Paris?
That is absolutely 100% correct, and I'm fine with that.
Yeah, no, he's the king.
But yeah, and even like in grad school, like I studied medieval art. Like I don't like the current times. I like the olden times.
And obviously fantasy tends to go back to the well here a lot. And I thought this movie did a great job distinguishing itself from the pack here. Mm-hmm. Because, I mean, we still live in the post-Christopher Nolan world of everything has to be gritty.
Yeah.
But never done with the finesse that he did.
No,
right?
Never. No, you just get Zack Snyder's Justice League.
Sure. And, I mean, yes, exactly. But this went the other way.
Yeah.
Like, it was so heightened and fantastical that one of the main takeaways, and it sounds so, like, childish, but one of my favorite parts of this was the color. This was like a kaleidoscopic movie. It really broke the narrative down. I mean, even more than the title cards for each chapter.
I loved the title cards.
It broke the narrative into distinct stages, like chapters that were fully dominated by one color at a time. There was a yellow one, a red one, a blue one, one that was basically completely in the dark,
Yeah.
and then a green and a white one.
Yeah. No, you're right about that. That's true.
And we've talked about color palettes in Tolkien chapters before.
Oh, yeah.
He does the same thing, but one of the big advantages of a visual medium,
You can see the color.
like it doesn't matter how many times you write the word green, it will never have the same effect on a reader or audience member as literally just seeing the color.
No,
green.
you're right. And like in the poem, I should say that the descriptions in the poem reminded me a lot of Tolkien because he goes into excessive detail, like very intentionally.
Yeah.
I'm saying he, it could be she. The poem, the author is unknown, I should say
And
that.
the whole story hinges on greenness.
Yes. But I'm saying like even as descriptive and as visceral as the poem is, it still wasn't the same type of experience as seeing it in a movie. And I like and I get the sense that, I mean, old poems were meant to be spoken out loud. That's how they come about. And that's why there are 8,000 versions, because it's a game of telephone and it changes over time. But I can picture like you like telling this story to your family, like around the fire at Christmas time, you know, and like, and it's still very visual. Like you can picture everyone like visualizing the Green Knight in his gold armor, but like it's still not quite the same. So,
and those like the color breakdowns there, I think it gives the movie a great episodic feel with each distinct section. And that division of like, all right, the yellow is gone, now we're moving on to something else. It allows for a feeling of closure, and it invites reflection more than I think most movies can ever achieve. And in the movement between those chapters, it gives the character and the audience like clear moments of growth where you can observe how things have changed. It feels kind of like an old school way of doing things. Back when there was like episodic television, when there was, I don't know, a half-hour drama. Like that's a much more serialized form of storytelling. I feel like we're sort of in the middle of the 4-hour movie era.
I think we're getting a bit past that. That was a big thing for like about 5 years. But no, I see what you're saying. I mean, now we're in the miniseries era. That's where we are.
And this was extremely satisfying.
No, it was
fulfilling. And for all the talk of honor in the actual script, this is a story of a character trying to become a knight and be worthy of that title. But there's a series of challenges along the way. I mean, you broke that down in the poem. But it never feels like a series of morality tests or preaching at the audience.
Right. It's never preachy, which is so interesting because, I mean, the poem really is a little bit preachy. I mean, it's about virtue and about being a good knight and resisting temptation. And the story takes place, well, actually in the poem, it's right after Christmas. It's at New Year's. In the movie, it's Christmas Day, which is fun. Same thing. But it's like, it's about, you know, this is a time to remember Christ and to be good and all these things and to be thankful for the year that's happened and the one about to come and yada yada. So, I mean, the poem doesn't feel preachy, but it is. You can tell it's meant to teach you a lesson, whereas the movie doesn't feel like that at all, somehow.
It was fun. It kind of felt like, and having such distinct chapters and these little quiet reset points throughout the movie, it sort of felt like stand-up comedy, where there were a series of premises you were getting, and the movie always zigzagged and went the other way. After you understood the premise, it surprised you and kind of whacked the movie in a different direction. Whether it's the character not being honorable in a situation where, you know, a knight talking about honor all the time would be, it kept swerving in a different direction. But it never felt like one of those exhausting modern like subversion of tropes movies.
Right.
Like, we're going to deconstruct what honor really is, and we're going to do it different than you ever, like, it's not that. It's not that self-satisfied, condescending, boring, derivative kind of modern version of that. And
yet somehow I've never seen another movie like this. Like, it was so different and subversive and challenging. Sorry, I'm stretching my legs out. Don't give me
constantly.
I like to stretch. I'm okay, but I've really never seen a movie like this. Like, it was fantasy, but it wasn't. It was horror, but it wasn't. It was surreal, but it wasn't. Like, I don't know. It felt really special to me, and I hadn't ever seen anything like it before. It doesn't mean that nothing else like this exists. I haven't seen every movie ever, but I haven't seen anything like it before, and I was really impressed.
All right, you want to jump into spoilers?
Yeah, let's jump into spoilers.
Cool. So now I get to talk about the idea I had on the way in.
On the way into what?
The White House.
Oh, this morning. Yes.
What do you mean this morning?
No. No time has elapsed since the last time we hit record. This is the same conversation.
Yeah.
An entire workday hasn't elapsed.
You know, the mirage would have been perfect.
Sorry.
If you hadn't just... I wonder if our voices sound different. You know how you sound kind of husky when you wake up in the morning?
Yeah, I sound all sexy and sleepy.
Well, dear listener, secondbreakfastpod@gmail.com if we sound different than we did a minute ago before we started this section.
Yeah, let us know.
So yeah, I had a couple points here that are more spoilery just because they're about the end game.
Yeah.
But then I was thinking before, and this is more
you
of
said that real Texan. I was thinking before. Sorry, I'm just proud that
I didn't even hear it.
Properly assimilated into the culture.
I was talking about The Witch being like such an important touchdown for me, for how I perceive horror movies and slow
the movie
burn
The Witch,
psychological stuff. Yeah, the individual witch that I'm friends with.
No, there's a character in here who's a witch. There's literally Morgan La Fay is
arguably.
Oh Christ!
We'll talk about her.
Okay,
we'll talk about her because I don't think it's conclusive.
Okay,
she's a funky character actually from folklore that is kind of reinterpreted and changed throughout adaptations.
Yeah.
I watched a cool video about the legacy of the Green Knight. And
I didn't know that.
How they played with her. Yeah, it's cool.
That's cool.
But the way I read all stories, and I can't believe I didn't do it to this one until a second before we were about to record, is Faustus.
Oh, Doctor Faustus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is absolutely a Faustus story. So zoom out, look at it structurally.
Okay. Yeah.
The beginning of the movie is a demon being conjured. Right. If you look at the Green Knight as a demon, and you look at that ritual that Morgan La Fay is doing,
right? Because she summons him, she's performing the ritual. Okay,
right? We'll get to the fact that she's summoning it on someone else's behalf.
Yeah,
but there is still a demon being conjured at the beginning of the play.
Yeah.
That will decide someone's fate.
Yeah,
and in the first interaction with the demon, the whole discussion is about the contract they're forging.
Yes,
which is for a set amount of time where you will get a benefit while the contract is going, and then when it comes due, basically you'll die.
Yeah.
So Faustus signs his soul. He signs a deal with the devil, the payment being his soul. So at the end of 24 years of having access to all the transcendent knowledge of the universe and basically the powers of having a demon for a henchman. At the end of that 24 years, his soul gets taken by Lucifer.
Yes.
So that's the barter here.
And what's the positive outcome that Gawain gets here is he just gets the glory of having killed the knight and having the axe,
which we see him benefit from constantly. I mean, every time he's in a pub, every interaction with women. I mean, like,
you can see it weighing on him, but he does have that benefit. It's interesting because in the poem, he doesn't carry the axe with him.
Yeah.
Like, he really doesn't get a whole lot out of that deal. It's more just for the glory of it.
Yeah.
Because he's already a knight. So it's about, I volunteer. I want to be a good knight. I'll, do this thing and then, sacrifice. But he doesn't die at the end, which is the big takeaway here. Or a big key difference is that Gawain doesn't die. He, what happens at the end? He's basically,
I think he
gets a scratch on his neck at the end in the poem. He gets a scratch on his neck, and then he takes the green belt, which we can talk about later. He takes the green belt home with him as a sign of his shame and sin for not telling the lord of the castle about the belt and stuff.
But
and
he's killed
kissing the wife.
Book.
He's killed in the movie. I know. I keep wanting to say book. There is no book. It's poem or movie. But yeah, so that's really different here, which is interesting. Yeah, and
I mean, it's slightly... I didn't even read the ending as ambiguous, like him saying, now off with your head. I think that absolutely means he's about to behead him.
Because we saw the option where he doesn't die, and that wasn't good.
But you also, in that fantasy, you saw his head fall off. So technically, you've already seen it. Like, you don't really need to see a beheading in a different location.
Yeah, they wouldn't do it again.
I'm not saying from a gore perspective it would be too intense. I just mean, poetically,
we don't need
you've
to
already
see
seen it.
Yes,
right?
But I don't think it's an ambiguous ending either.
And the interesting thing with... there's something about this story that is locked into the idea of honor. and virtue and justice and these things that are rarely rewarded and take a lot of time. But the contract that Gawain enters here is a shortcut because it gives him all of the prestige and respectability of a knight without having to do any of that work. We see the way people treat him, the scene after the Christmas game, and the setup in Faustus is that he's a respected old theologian who's done everything he can without actually having died and met God. Like, he's done everything he can as a mortal.
Is Faustus young when he makes the deal?
No, that's what I'm saying. He's an old theologian.
Okay.
He's in his, like, late 50s, which for, 1592
that's
was
old.
Pretty old. So the idea there, you can read Faustus as a suicide play, where he's done everything he can as a mortal. So him signing this deal to get that last scrap of knowledge he can't get at the cost of his eternity is him killing himself, basically.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how this story twists that, because the demon, I guess, the Green Knight, specifically tells Gawain, like, I'll do to you whatever you do to me. So if he gave him a paper cut, he would have been fine a year later.
Right, but he, like, had to completely behead him.
He in that first scene, Gawain makes the choice.
Yeah.
He makes the most dishonorable choice to take the shortcut because he wants the respectability of being a knight. When he's talking to the king in the previous scene, the king says, tell me your big story. And he says, I don't have one yet. He takes the shortcut to get that story in the next scene.
Yes, it's all about shortcuts. He's always trying to, like it's like the student who's trying to complete the assignment and get the A, but isn't actually learning anything and isn't going about it in the right way. It's looking up the answers to your homework online. Yeah. It's not actually doing it. Like, throughout the story, he's like trying to get there, but I'm trying to think of the shortcuts he takes. Like, he tries to, like, cut through certain, like, parts of the country and, like, tries to take advantage of the kid who helps him, and then that ends up screwing him over.
He doesn't pay the kid who gives him directions.
Yeah, he doesn't pay him. And then when he's at the castle, he falls to temptation more so than Gawain does in the poem, which is really interesting. I feel like the movie in general explores the hypotheticals and the not so knightly parts of Gawain much more than the poem. In the poem, he kisses her and takes her girdle or the green belt. Yeah. But that's it. There's no fluid.
Like, he fails the whole way and then wins at the end in the movie.
Right.
Versus in the poem, it seems to be the opposite.
Right. And it seems like in both of them, the payment that he makes is not justified. It's appropriate for what he does. So throughout the movie, he's failing quite a lot. I mean, he's trying to be good, but he is falling to temptation and succumbing to, like, earthly desires much more so. And so then the penance is he is killed at the end. He, like, does the honorable thing and doesn't run away and is killed. And even thinks about running away, because we see that play out. In the poem, he, like, is a bit less sinful, and he doesn't die at the end, but he still has to carry the like badge of dishonor of his sins on the belt.
And, like, there's an interesting thing, I mean, in the visual medium of this movie adaptation of Green Knight versus the always visual adaptation of a play with Doctor Faustus, consequences are interesting. How you choose to render them visually. Because the end of Faustus is the payment comes due and he's dragged down to hell by the demons. Green Knight specifically avoids that comeuppance moment.
Yeah.
You get to see it, because basically Faustus's consequence isn't felt till the very end of the story. Here, Gawain makes the worst mistake at the very beginning, in the first scene with the Green Knight. And then the rest of... Maggie just choked on water.
I was trying to cough quietly.
The rest of the movie, every interaction he has where he fails horribly with everyone, he's not courteous, he's not respectful, he does, he fails to display all of these virtues the entire way. The consequences are felt the whole journey.
Yes.
Where you see him then get kidnapped and punished and stripped of his clothes.
Right, yeah, because none of that happens in the poem. He has no trouble on the road. Like, the weather is difficult, and that's it.
So you don't need the big obvious comeuppance. We don't need to actually see him die at the end.
Right.
Like it's the what is that? The someone dies 1,000 deaths before, you know?
Nope.
Okay. Maggie, I've known Maggie 300,000 years. She's never correctly known an idiom.
You grew up with idioms that people haven't used in like 200 years, so it's not my fault. You say the weirdest things.
Just to finish the Faustus thing.
We
talked about...
It's a great comparison. I really like it.
I talked about kind of the calm surrealism that Gawain, Dev Patel's performance as Gawain brings to this story. Mm-hmm. I think it's a great echo of the feeling of all of the middle acts, 2, 3, and 4, in Doctor Faustus, because that time, I mean, the second the demon shows up, this theologian knows for sure that God's real.
Sure,
right?
that's it right there.
Which means that the deed he just signed in his own blood is certainly going to come due.
Yeah.
Like, he knows he's dead from basically the third scene of the play. Mm-hmm. So the rest of the play, until he dies, is a form of purgatory. And if you look at purgatory as that wishy-washy, cloudy, in-between, Gawain basically rides through that.
Yes,
for
that's
most
what
of
the
this
landscape
movie.
literally looks like. It's all gray and cloudy. That's very true. That's nice because it's all wintry and it's all shot in Ireland, but it's supposed to just be Britain in general, so it's very cloudy. That's a nice point.
And I think the fun thing of viewing stories in the form of like this Faustus structure is you really get the shape of relationships and power dynamics and consequences. Like it's just a good way to understand relationships because most stories are based around the relationship between two characters. Yeah. So you have the Faustus and you have the Mephistopheles. Who gives who power? Does the demon give the theologian power by confirming his ideas and then giving him this access to this transcendent power? Or does the human give the demon power by giving him the soul that he can then bring to Lucifer to elevate his station?
Yeah, like how much power does the Green Knight have if no one takes him up on his challenge?
And the Green Knight here, the demon, is in basically 2 scenes of the movie. So it's really a deep dive into the Faustus role. And the fun twist that this story has is that Faustus isn't the one who does the conjuring. It's his mom.
Yeah, right. So he didn't even ask for it. He mom, sort of did because the first scene he's like saying he wants to be a knight.
And she gives him she gives him the opportunity to prove himself. I mean, she's summoning a demon to do it, and the stakes are pretty high.
A little bit.
But it's fascinating that she's doing that on behalf. Like there are multiple scenes of these rituals or spells, whatever like conjuring she's doing during the Christmas game. And I was expecting her to become a more active part in the story.
Me too. I really wanted, because I liked that they were exploring her more, because she's barely in the poem. Like I said earlier, it is revealed at the end by the Green Knight that she summoned the Green Knight, and she's like semi-related to Arthur and Gawain, but isn't like his mom.
Yeah. And
she's also the old lady in the castle. But that's it.
But I liked that she was kind of hands-off. Like, her son was complacent and hasn't really proven himself. So she just sets the table and walks away.
Yeah.
And he does what he will with the meal.
But I'm saying I wish that they had dug into her more and that she had played a larger role.
Oh, yeah. I just meant that her inaction does still develop her character.
Sure.
Because we see her choice. That, like, continued non-interference must be difficult. I mean, it's not like she hates her son. She still loves him.
I guess what's throwing me off is they didn't address the Green Knight is also old man in the castle. Morgan La Fay is also old woman in the castle. Like, I don't know why they didn't do that, because it's a really cool reveal at the end of the poem, and it came as a shock to me because I had just seen the movie and I was finishing up the poem and I was like, oh, that's really cool. That wasn't in the movie. And I don't think it's even hinted at. Like, it's different actors, like, not at all. Like, and the woman who plays the old woman in the castle is a different race than Morgan Le Fay. So, like, it's not at all the same.
And they do, I mean, I'll talk about it in a second, but they do double up cast members playing multiple roles elsewhere.
Yes.
So they obviously could have
They're touching on that idea. Yeah. But it was odd to me that they were going to dig more into Morgan Le Fay and then not have her be an important part of the story in that way.
Yeah. It's such a striking divergence, I think, from the source material. And for my purposes, I'm glad that the nice Joel Egerton Lord at the castle, I don't know the character's name.
He doesn't have a name. He's just Lord.
The movie's very minimal on that kind of stuff, which I appreciate because I always forget it.
Well, I mean, even King Arthur is just the king.
Yeah, sure.
He's not even named, which is
fun because it keeps you from falling into all of your associations and exactly. But I like that the Lord isn't also the Green Knight here because he stays ambiguous. Like the ending is satisfying, and knowing this director, there's a lot of ambiguity, and then the ending's pretty satisfying, which is good, and that's kind of what I got from A Ghost Story. Yeah. But here, I like that he can be the demon. He can be whatever. You can still force him to be the Lord in your mind, but when they filmed it on set, it was literally Ralph Ineson, the dad from The Witch.
Yeah.
And the entire costume was practical.
Which I love. I think I was really surprised when I learned that because it's really impressive. And like, it wasn't surprising as in that costume looked fake.
It's impressive because it looks better than Treebeard.
Yeah. Well, that was 20 years ago, so there's
a lot more
grains
money, though.
Of salt.
I mean, they just rubbed some mulch on Ralph Ineson.
No, but it's really impressive.
Yeah.
And like the sound design with his character is really good. Do you want to talk about the doubling of actors then? I feel like that's a nice thing to talk about.
Let me show you how I lead into it because I think it's interesting.
Wow. You have planned ahead here.
Only a little. I have literally 2 comments left.
Okay.
So back to The Witch a little, because I do see this as an evolution of that style of horror filmmaking. I think one of the themes that it shares with that movie is an undercurrent of repressed sexuality. Yeah. Which is, I mean, that's innate, right? If you're going to set a story in this era, you're not going to have the same social norms and freedoms we have now.
Not so much, no.
And acknowledging that and playing with it, if it like serves the story, is fantastic. I love that. And also, art didn't do that for a long time.
No, it didn't.
It didn't acknowledge these shortcomings. So yeah, that's fun. And in The Witch, it's Caleb, who's the younger brother of Anya Taylor-Joy's character, who's Thomason. Basically, he's having his puberty and there are no girls around, so he starts to like objectify his sister. Yeah. Like there are these moments where his gaze will linger on her figure. Yeah. In a way that... No, you go.
I was going to say, it's more like just like a boyish curiosity than like I'm into my sister. Like it's not that. It's just I'm a boy and I've never seen boobies.
I mean, like you know, they're exiled from like a puritanical kind of colony, and they have to live out next to the woods with just their immediate family.
That's literally it. Yeah, he's never. Yeah, right.
And like you said, like at no point during the movie does his attention seem incestuous. No, he's just extremely repressed, and the family's very isolated.
Yeah.
So it comes across as sympathetic. It's not.
It's not. Ooh, the creepy kid. It's
wrong, I guess, but it doesn't. It doesn't. It's not played as a perversion.
No, it's just a human moment.
Yeah, exactly. Because he doesn't know what to do with it. He's like 12.
Yeah.
So in The Green Knight, I read this into their choice to double cast Gawain's like peasant girlfriend into the lady in this respectable castle later on in the movie.
I really liked that double casting because I wasn't expecting it, and even seeing Dev Patel play his reaction to it, he's like he recognizes her, but he also knows it's not her at the same time. Again, and he's very unnerved by it.
The calm surrealism.
Yeah, it's really good.
He has no idea what to do with it either.
No, he doesn't.
But I do, like, it's almost a touch of meta storytelling when he notices that they look the same.
Yes,
because for a second I thought maybe she was sold off to a nice family like they used to do, and now she's like the lady of the house.
Sure, or it's the thing of maybe this is that none of this is actually happening. Like maybe this is an indication that this is just some like hallucination, because he's had those before in the story. He had those with that old house with the
ghost,
the woman who was beheaded,
with
all
the
that
skull.
Yeah. So it was like maybe none of this is real, which I liked that ambiguity there.
But when you stack that with the, I don't know what to call it, like sort of a road less traveled hallucination at the end of what would have happened if he ran away from the Green Knight, I think it comes to suggest that Gawain's relationship with women is singular, and he sort of sees them all as the same. Like, the relationship he has with the lady of the house, I don't know what to call her.
Just the Lord's
Lord's
lady,
wife?
the lady. She's
Okay,
referred
cool.
to as the lady in the story.
Defining her by her husband Maggie.
That's how they did it. I don't know what to tell you.
Like their relationship, where she cheats on her husband with Gawain, kind of. It like that's a furtive, secretive, kind of shameful relationship.
Mm-hmm. Especially when a man is offering you his hospitality.
Yeah,
it's layered. Yeah.
In the same way that the road less traveled hallucination at the end, Gawain's awful to his peasant girlfriend and is with her in private and then abandons her and
marries someone else who's more of noble birth and has a son and all that.
He gives in to the temptation in both cases and then runs screaming from the commitment or the you could say the consequences. And it's in my notes I called it the alt history coward arc, which I'll come back to in a second.
Oh God!
But he's horrible to his girlfriend there too.
Yeah,
and I view that how he treats her when she was kind of his redemption and humanity. She was the conduit for his redemption arc in the real world. And then when you go into this road less traveled, when you see him treat her so horribly, to me, that was his undoing as a character. Yeah. And it reminded me of when Caleb walks through the woods in The Witch and his over-eagerness when he sees a pretty girl walk out of a hut and then we see that it's the witch in disguise. That's another thing of kind of double casting and Caleb giving into that woman he thinks is his literal undoing.
Well, and in this movie, in the scene where they're in the bedroom and they have an intimate moment, she walks off and then he looks up and the old woman is also in the room. Yeah. Now she is blind or has her eyes covered at least for the entirety of her existence on screen.
Still hear things,
but she's there, and so you're right that is echoed there. That's really funny. Well, I'm glad you brought that up too, because in the poem I said earlier that when the Green Knight reveals who he is and they have their whole confrontation at the end, Gawain just has this little moment where he goes off and he's like, women are to blame for everything. He's like, women is because of their temptations and their, it's just your classical, those evil. I was trying to find it while you were talking and I can't find, it's just a few lines, but he, just your typical medieval misogyny. But so I liked that they acknowledge that and address it here, but then they give him a chance to, they both make him fail more by actually committing an act with her, but then, beyond kissing her, but then they have him redeem himself more strongly by letting himself be killed. Sure. So it's an interesting way that they played with that without making him go on a tangent about how evil women are. Yeah. Even though this whole plot is driven by a woman.
So much of this
meaning
movie,
the mother.
Yeah, and so much of this movie and the characterization of its characters. Oof. Way to go, basically, the characterization, what I meant was of Gawain.
No,
of its lead.
Know. I was just messing.
You get to know him almost explicitly or exclusively by his actions. There's very little dialogue for long stretches of this movie.
Yeah, well, because a lot of it is just him by himself, so he's got no one to talk to, so you just see his face.
Whether it's in this botched relationship with the lady of the house or the hallucination version of his future with the peasant girlfriend, that misogyny still comes through, right? He, even if you don't get that speech, you see his actions.
You can see the way that he thinks about women, and what's great about the what you're calling the road less traveled, the hypothetical what if I ran away.
Let's go back to calling it the alt history coward arc.
Sorry, the alt history coward arc. AHCA.
I mean, just the coward arc is fine.
I like Achka. I think that's cooler. Okay, so what's nice about that? Literally, what was I gonna say?
No idea.
No, just what's nice. Oh, what's nice about that is you can see that as David Lowery is giving his viewers a chance to see what could have happened, but then it's also probably Gawain imagining what himself what would happen. It's not just for us, it's also for him. So you see him recognize that part of himself, I would treat, I don't even know what her name is, his peasant girlfriend, I would treat her, that's a good sign, right? He's like, I would treat her terribly. He knows that about himself. And so then he knows that the only way to redeem that is to sacrifice
because he knows he's not heroic, he's not virtuous, he's not a true knight, and that this hallucination, I mean, I like that you're saying it's in his head, because it very well could be. It comes in the one moment in the whole movie where he has to be honest with himself and his shortcomings, because it's as he flinches when the Green Knight is fulfilling the deal.
Just doing what he said he would do, yeah.
And it's the
following through.
It's the most embarrassing time that Gawain fails, and he can't run from. So this very well could be him acknowledging his failures and seeing what his life would be like, because he knows who he is and that he hasn't changed. I guess he still could, but he
hasn't become a knight.
Right.
Like, the only thing that he can do that's worthy of knighthood is letting himself be killed and honoring this deal that he's made. Because even in the bedroom with the lady afterwards, she says, "You are no knight," and that's like, I think he remembers that when he's confronting the Green Knight.
This cowardice arc is very much my favorite part of the movie, because it really bothered me.
Me too. I was getting so upset because it's not like it's a 2-minute scene. It goes on for probably 15 minutes.
It is a montage of the rest of Gawain's life.
Yeah, so it's like, it's him abandoning his peasant girlfriend. He has this son. He becomes the king because, like, Arthur is sick and dying. So, like, he becomes king. He has this kid.
He lies about what happened with the Grey Knight.
Yes, right. He says that he killed him. He's like, yeah, I beat him. I did it. And then, his son dies in battle. He gets old. Like, everything goes wrong.
And he's miserable the entire time.
Yes, and this scene goes on for so long. I was convinced that that's what the ending was. And I was
don't talk about the ending yet. But I want to hold on
I thought that's what
the feeling. Just don't talk about him dying in it yet.
Sorry.
Just
okay.
Yeah,
this is the spoiler section.
Yeah, no, I just meant that feeling of you hating it while it was happening. Okay, I want to focus on that for a second.
Because I was upset. Because I was looking over you. I was like, is he enjoying this? Because I was all on board until we got here, I
heard Dave Chappelle talking about how he structures jokes. And because he's so good at it. For a second, I
thought you were confusing him with Dev Patel, which is something I do frequently.
That's very funny.
I always have to think about it for a second. And there's another...
It phonetically checks out.
There's another comedian who has a really similar name.
Okay, cool.
What is it? I don't know what it is.
So he was saying sometimes it's fun as like a test of his abilities. At the very beginning, making the premise of a joke something really offensive that everyone will disagree with. So he loses them, and then over the course of the joke, before the punchline, if he can get them back.
Yes, so
that's
it's like
a fun challenge.
It's a mutual trust between the audience and the creator, which is hard to maintain.
I would say the first 10 or 15 minutes of this movie goes the other way, and we're very sympathetic to Gawain. And even though he fails throughout the movie, I felt very with him.
I was rooting for him the whole time.
The swerve here at the end, when you're expecting the crescendo of, okay, well, now this is a folkloric thing. He's finally going to come into his own and earn his spot as a knight. And that's when he's most disappointing.
Yeah.
Like, by the end of this montage, going through the rest of his life of him being a disappointment, I fully turned on the character.
Yeah, me too. I was mad and I felt betrayed by the movie and by the character.
It was shocking. It was upsetting and sustained long enough. I mean, 15 minutes of anything in a movie is a huge percentage of the movie.
It's a huge chunk. Like, I'm not exaggerating. That scene was really 12, 15 minutes long.
And no dialogue.
No, it's all montage and music and slow-mo.
But you're so overwhelmed by what's happening that you almost don't notice that till towards the end. And it was sustained so long that I believed in it. I did not think it was a hallucination because they kept it so long, because they showed the consequences so brutally and comprehensively. I went past hating him. I gave up on him. I moved on. And then it was still there. I was still looking at the consequences of this guy's horrible choices. And it got to the point where the movie, I mean, it's not a long movie. No. And I started to feel shame for the character. Like, I went through my own full arc with him in this one scene.
Yeah.
And then I felt shame for him. And that reveal at the end when his head falls off and we, again, like brutally snap back to the Grey Knight conflict.
Yeah.
It didn't feel like a fake out.
Yeah, I didn't feel like, oh, okay. It just felt like you understood Gawain's all of his motivations much more, because after the montage and the what could have been, or even during it, like before you realize it's not real, you begin to understand that Gawain insisting on going to see the Green Knight, I don't think was because he was trying to be noble. It was because he wanted the glory of defeating the Green Knight. Like when he leaves the Lord's castle and he comes upon that guy in the woods who says like, absolutely do not go to the Green Chapel. It will be terrible and you will regret it. He's like, you'll be better off being a coward and living in your shame versus going. And so at first when Gawain insisted on going, I thought, oh, he's being noble. But I really think it was more about he just wanted the glory. And so because then when he turns around in the fake out and realizes he's not going to survive, he's not going to get the glory, and so it's not worth it. So you totally turn on him and his entire motivations throughout the whole movie. It's really interesting.
It's like the anti-Thor arc. You know he's not worthy. The whole thing is like, is Thor worthy to lift the hammer that's heavy to everyone unless they're special?
And it's like, no. Gawain wasn't worthy to wield the axe.
And without words, but with a good portion of time, the movie demonstrates the meaning or its statement on heroism. Versus some sort of lame speechifying or like wet noodle deconstruction of this is why you're not a hero, Mr. Garwin. Like, they didn't do that, thank God.
No.
They just told the story.
Yeah.
They did. There was no embarrassing like modern deconstruction.
No.
It felt like old storytelling, and maybe that's why it landed so hard with me.
Right.
It reminded me actually of Watchmen.
Oh, okay.
And we might cover Watchmen later on the show.
Teaser.
Not today.
I was like, not this episode.
We might do like an issue by issue thing.
Yeah.
Because it's such a fruitful story to talk about. But in that, I can think of specific moments in the run of Watchmen where you see really bold actions taken, sometimes on principle, sometimes out of desperation, and then immediately, harshly, you see the repercussions of those actions. In a way that make you understand the risk someone took, and then you get to make a choice of like, do I think this thing was warranted?
Yeah.
But it's punishing and unforgiving in the way that maybe Game of Thrones has like repopularized. And I just, when his head fell off, it didn't feel like a twist fake out of this is the road less traveled. When we cut back to Gawain, I knew he was going to die. I didn't think
it
wasn't like Scrooge. Sorry, it wasn't Scrooge learning his lesson.
Exactly, it wasn't
being
that.
The better guy.
I was gonna say because it so easily could have been like the Green Knight, like wags his finger at Gawain and it's like, okay, well, you were supposed to honor what you said you were gonna do, mister. So here's a little scratch on the neck. Now take your green belt back.
And don't you forget it.
Exactly. And then like you cut to a year later and he's defeating someone in battle and he's the king. Like it didn't do that. And that's kind of what the poem does, to be honest. But you can't fault the poem for that because it's an incredibly old story and that wasn't a cliche back then. Like that's normal. So this movie takes that old idea but then just makes it a bit harsher and a bit more real. Yeah,
you cut back to him and his face is still terrified and kind of cowardly.
But he does it.
The moment, I mean, as much as this show's about Lord of the Rings or horror movies or Winnie the Pooh, it's about adaptation. And there's a moment here when Gawain's talking to the lady of the house about the books that she transcribes and the old legends she like recopies. And she says sometimes she changes them. And when she's doing the portrait, he says, I've already had a portrait. And she said, you've never had a portrait from me. And that she does it differently. And then she does this weird, funky, like upside down tintype thing.
Yes, right.
But that's like a direct statement as it applies to the changes you're making here from the source material. And it's so bold. It's so interesting and fully realized and confident that I love them.
Right, yeah. No, it's like it's an adaptation for our modern day, for modern audiences, for modern issues, for modern problems and concerns and ideas. And even like I'm thinking about with the lady in the castle. I mean, again, in the poem, there's no actual like sexual act except for a kiss. But the easy thing to do, like if they had adapted this book or this poem, I keep saying book, like 10, 20 years ago, they would have had Gawain like assault her probably. And instead, what happens is she almost assaults him. I mean, not quite. It's a seduction, but she violates him. And he's like immediately ashamed and feels betrayed by her. And so it's like all the complications of male sexuality and violations and temptation. Like that's all very nuanced, and that's a much more interesting idea than just having him like fail and just assault her. Like that would be so boring and like tired. So they make it more interesting, and I think more modern, more appropriate for 2021 compared to like 2012, for example.
And like for as much as the story doesn't moralize in any sort of like condescending,
no, it doesn't.
Like talking about story instead of telling a story.
Yeah, I'm never taught a lesson.
No, and
I'm encouraged to think about morals and ethics, but I'm not taught a lesson.
And unless I'm watching Sesame Street, I don't want that in my stories.
No, I'm an adult.
I want to see characters who are interesting and complicated and unsure. I don't want to see like power dynamics and relationships that are completely healthy. I want to see, like, Succession is built on the model of how toxic can a relationship be. Yeah. And it's gripping storytelling.
Right. It's not meant to be this is how things should be. It's not a fantasy.
It's like,
and not as in the genre way, but in a, you know what I mean?
It's dark, like trauma-fueled comedic drama that has facilitated some of the best acting performances of the last decade.
Yeah, and it's an over-dramatic version of things that you experience in your real life.
Right, which is what stories do.
And that's what this is. That's what, I mean, obviously I don't live in medieval England. No. I don't know any witches. I don't experience ghosts in the forest, and I don't, cut the heads off of giant green knights. But all of those themes are in daily life.
And that's what stories can do. In an hour and a half, you can see witches and ghosts and skulls
and
that's
what
giants.
Fantasy is. That's the great thing about fantasy.
I think there's something elevated and heightened in storytelling at all. Because it is finite. Because you don't see Gawain take pee breaks and eat 3 meals a day throughout this story. Like, there is something heightened and exclusive to just the moments that are represented. I mean, Macbeth is the shortest Shakespeare play, and a lot of big stuff happens.
Right, because they're just focusing on that. We don't need to see every element.
Like, kings are being killed before you're totally sure if Lady Macbeth has a name or if that's just her name. Things happen quick. Yeah. And you learn from the actions. And this screenplay and the way it was directed is so much about actions in a way that I don't feel like I've seen executed well in a long time. Yeah. I feel like we've gotten a lot of people writing screenplays that are writing about story or describing the story they'd like to see. Yeah, but it's not punchy and provocative.
It's not just telling you the story.
Yeah, it doesn't like respect the role of the audience member. And this, I felt nailed it. I felt The Witch meant a ton to me, and this feels like the next step there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. This was the fantasy version of The Witch for me. I really liked it.
Please support it. Honestly, see it at a theater or rent it online, whatever you want. Yeah. Just I can't wait support this.
Yeah, I want to watch it again, like now, and like look, especially when you have because I wasn't expecting any sort of twist in the story. I thought it was going to be pretty predictable, especially because I'd read most of the poem. But I wasn't expecting there to be a twist, so now I'm excited to go back and watch it, knowing about said twist. So no, it was great. I really liked it. Also, the score is fantastic. Reminded me a lot of Mark Corvin, who's done a lot of Robert Eggers scores. He did The Witch.
And The Lighthouse.
I don't remember the name of this person. Hang on, I gotta look it up.
He did The Lighthouse too.
It was really good.
One thing that just struck me was sort of the interpretive change to the title here. Of taking Gawain out of the title and just calling it The Green Knight.
Sorry, it's the composer is Daniel Hart. Anyway. No, I just wanted to throw it out before, because sometimes you get carried away and talk for 20 minutes.
What do you think of that title change?
Well, as a package deal, I liked it, because you talked about the title cards in the movie. Yeah. Because it would say like, this is the story of, and then it would say Sir Gawain and ... and then it would say like a journey, and then a game of winnings. Like, it didn't say The Green Knight until the very end. Yeah. The Green Knight's not listed, because I think it says like an adaptation of or something like that, or a retelling of. So like, it's not saying this is the title of the movie. But I don't know what to think about that. Like I like it all together, obviously, is what I'm saying, like revealing the Green Knight at the very end. But I don't know how I feel about just calling it The Green Knight.
I like it. I think it focuses the story on the consequences and that one pivotal Faustian choice that he has to make right at the beginning.
And it removes, it strips Gawain of his glory. Yeah, exactly. He's not even named. It doesn't matter. Yeah, that's nice then. That's good. I just had to think about it for 2 more seconds.
And
just hadn't thought about it yet.
I believe Tolkien did a translation
He did. I read a lot about it in not a lot. I read of it in the introduction to this
cool. Okay.
to the poem. He's written one of the more famous translations. The one I read is not his. It's just the one that I had. The translation's by Burton Raffle, because the original is written in like not Old English, but like between Old and Middle, which is very hard to read. I read the Canterbury Tales in Middle English, and that was a challenge. Like a couple lines that were like mentioned in the afterword and stuff, I was like, oh, because I was kind of annoyed at first. I was like, oh, I wish I'd had the original at least side by side, but I wouldn't have wanted to mess with it. Even though like it is very rewarding to read these things in their original.
Yeah, sure.
Like it's, I don't have to tell you that. It's incredibly rewarding, but I was more just reading this for what's in the poem. That's kind of the only reason I read it.
Yeah.
But it was fun, very lyrical, and I can see Tolkien having a ball with it. And it kind of makes me understand some of Tolkien's description choices.
Yeah.
And his like sing-songy, the way he constructs his songs, I found it similar to at least the translation of this one. So, yeah.
I wish he was this dense with his storytelling, but yeah.
Yeah, me too. What are you going to do? All right. Well, thanks everybody.
Yeah.
This Friday, we're releasing our second part of our movie discussion of The Two Towers.
Yep.
And then next week we're starting Return of the King. So that'll be exciting.
Cool.
You mentioned the plugs at some point, right?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. Oh yeah, because we had Flora's wonderful feedback. All right. Thanks everybody. Go watch this movie.
Yeah, support this.
Please, because it's so good. All right. Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.